Okay, yeah, I just don't be alone. Don't sit there and be isolated.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, we are going to, I think this will be a fun night for you guys. We're going to end up diving into a study on angelology, which is not something that we do a whole lot as Christians. We'll talk about why, actually, that's almost appropriate that we don't give a ton of time to angels. But in a class like this, it's fun to delve into some things that maybe we wouldn't naturally chase down and that kind of thing. So anyway, hope to be able to do that. Carlene, do you want to introduce yourself? Because this is your first time in here. And from Cedar Falls, she was passing through and thought, oh, instead of zooming the class, why not jump in? You want to introduce yourself? And
yeah, Carlene Danielson, my husband Kendall.
Nice.
We go to Candale in Cedar Falls.
So we go way back. So when I first became a Christian, I was at Cedar Heights Baptist Church. That was the church that was the first Christian church I'd ever been part of, and so we've known each other for, I came to Christ in 1981. So that was a few years ago. But she just came from visiting a mutual friend of ours, a much dear friend to Carlene now. But the guy that discipled me, he and his 4 kids lived just on a shoestring. He'd drive school bus to try to make ends meet as he's discipling university students, kind of a mini salt company, mini for sure, but huge impact in my life. I mean, massive impact on my life. Discipled me. He'd take me around when he'd go preach at churches, take me along and let me give my testimony, and then he'd preach. And I mean, we spent tons and tons of time together. And he was actually killed tragically several years ago now, and his wife invited me to help give the funeral. And anyway, his daughter, Kathy, Carlene was just with her. And a number of years ago, she was actually, this is kind of one of those freak accidents, but she was struck by lightning. And though survived, it has imperiled her life a lot, even just mentally, the whole neurological system, her whole neurological system was really hurt by that. So thanks for being a good friend to Kathy, even though she woke up and didn't even know who Carlene was. I mean, that just kind of thing anyway, what a cool connection we've got from years back and all that. Actually, this is both of your first time in, so you want to start and introduce yourselves and You're eating? Okay, you start, Brian, then Amy.
Yeah, Brian Belk, my wife Amy, and she just had some jaw surgery a few months ago, so she only gets little pieces of time to eat. So.
Totally. Okay, you'd be embarrassed, but I'm going to make you say, why did you miss the first day of class?
Well, let's see, that's when we were in Utah, and I was doing a half Ironman triathlon out in St. George, Utah, with one of my boys. Last year with my other boy, I did a 50-mile run in Leadville, Colorado with the other one, twin boys. We have 4 kids. Twin boys out in Utah, a daughter in Charlotte, North Carolina, a daughter in Nashville. So.
Just doing a half marathon. Like if there's going to be a lame excuse for missing class, just doing a half Ironman. That's crazy. Yeah, cannot imagine. All right. We're going to start in our Bibles, as is our custom. So we're going to do something a little different tonight, even for the devotional thing. So we're talking about angels. And, angels have one primary ministry, and that's to serve. They're called, in fact, ministers or servants often. So there's their title or classification, angels, and then there's sub-classifications from there. But their role, I guess, is to serve. They serve God. In fact, let's do this. Go to Psalm 103. We'll hit up a couple of different passages. It's their role as servants that's teeing up this devotional. So Psalm 103, if you look down toward the end, starting in verse 20. Psalm 103, 20. Bless the Lord, all his angels of great strength, who do his word, obedient to his command. Bless the Lord, all his armies, his servants who do his will, which is very likely also still on the theme of angels, the host, the armies, likely of heaven. And they too are his servants who do his will. Bless the Lord, all his works, and all the places where he rules. My soul, bless the Lord. So, these incredible, glorious, mighty, and almost innumerable creatures live to serve, and it is their honor to serve, and they are, like filled with joy as they're able to fall before the Lord and serve him, and to serve us. If you go to Hebrews, we'll look at this a little bit more closely in a bit here, but go to the book of Hebrews, in chapter 1. It's so striking that when you get to Hebrews, which is such a complex book and so filled with all these Old Testament allusions, the whole first chapter is all about comparing Christ to angels, which is kind of crazy. But the very last verse of Hebrews 1, speaking of angels, are they not all ministering spirits sent out to serve those who are going to inherit salvation? So not only is their charge to serve the Lord, their charge also is to serve us, which is just mind-blowing. When people in the Old Testament and New Testament see angels, their response is to fall down and worship them because they seem so glorious and so otherworldly and so supernatural. And yet those very beings who it seems like we should fall down and honor them, are in fact charged with serving us. So, yeah, just amazing that beings so... It'd be like, I don't know, I dig animals, and especially when I'm in Africa, and I just can imagine like if lions and elephants and hippo, or some of these mighty beasts of Africa, were almost like docile pets, just waiting for me to say fetch or whatever. You know what I mean? Like like the contradiction of that is so, like the same thing with angels. You're just like, wait, you're the ones who are at our bidding? Makes no sense. All that to say, that got me on the theme of servanthood, and I've got there the Hebrew word there, eved, which means servant. So servant of the Lord is eved of the Lord. I want you to go back with me to the book of Deuteronomy. So we're going to do a little Bible drill here tonight for a minute. Go to a handful of passages. And I want you to see how this theme of servanthood, angels, I guess what I'm getting at, angels actually serve as almost like a prototype, I would say, of what created beings ought to do. Like the holy angels live to serve. And they're good examples for us, is what I'm saying, about how we are supposed to be. So when you get to Deuteronomy 34, here's what it says. Moses went up from the plains, Deuteronomy 34. Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo to the top of Pisgah, which faces Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land, Gilead as far as Dan, all of Naphtali, the land of Ephraim, the land of Manasseh, all the land of Judah, as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negeb, and the plain in the valley of Jericho, the city of palms, as far as Zoar. And the Lord said to him, this is the land I promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your own eyes, but you will not cross into it. You remember from Numbers chapter 20, he smacked the rock when he wasn't supposed to smack the rock. And we don't know all that was going on between the lines there, but that was egregious enough that the Lord said, you know what, you've crossed a line, and I'm going to take you as far as the threshold of the promised land, but you're not going to be the one to take him over. Somebody else is going to take over the leadership at that point. But he kind of magically allows him to stand on this site, and the Lord, I don't know if in a vision or whatever, allows him to see all the greatness of the land. And I don't know if he's letting him fly over it, whatever it is, but he's allowed him to, he's describing a massive geographical area, right? So Moses is given the opportunity to kind of have this breathtaking moment to see the promised land. Okay, this is the verse that I was getting to, though, verse 5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the Lord's word. Right there, this is the first time that Moses is called an Abed, a servant of the Lord. And it's intriguing that he doesn't call himself that. So he goes up to die, and obviously Joshua, we imagine, or somebody else picked up the pen and like put the last words in this 5th book of Moses, the books of Moses, the Pentateuch, the last one being Deuteronomy. And you almost get the idea that, like if someone dies and their loved ones want to put something besides just their name on a tombstone, they want to like nail exactly kind of good description of this person. The best description they could come up with Moses is servant of the Lord. Now I want you to think about that, because if you're an Israelite and you've been following Moses around, think of the titles that you could give him. You could, in all wide-eyed, boldness, prophet of the Lord, leader of the armies of the Lord, valiant man of God, whatever. I mean, there are so many descriptors of Moses that would all be spot on. And he uses the word servant. I mean, it is the lowest rung that you can get to. But it's given to him as an honor, right? This is like Moses, servant of the Lord. It's almost like with a hushed tone kind of thing. Like, this is my effigy or whatever, like a thing you say about somebody that has died. So go to Joshua, the very next book, and go to the very end of Joshua, chapter 24. And here's what you're going to find. Joshua 24:29. After these things, the Lord's servant Joshua, son of Nun, died at the age of 110. Once again, this is the first time that Joshua is called Ebed, servant of the Lord. And it doesn't come until he dies. It's almost like, and by the way, Joshua calls Moses servant of the Lord throughout the book of Joshua. It's like that's the name he wants Moses to be remembered by. And now he never takes that upon himself. After he dies, somebody else picks up the pen, is like, Joshua, servant of the Lord. So it's just remarkable that to be a servant, even though these are the most heroic, again, if you go through Joshua, commander of the armies, valiant, faithful, that believed God when almost nobody else, only Caleb and he believed, like so many other things that are heroic about this guy, they give him the name servant of the Lord. So go to Isaiah now. Isaiah chapter 42. Isaiah 42. And this is one of those prophetic chapters of Isaiah. This is my servant. I strengthen him. This is my chosen one. I delight in him. I have put my spirit on him. He will bring justice to the nations. So he'll go on. We're just going to look at that in this little chunk of Isaiah. A lot of prophecies about Jesus. But notice what he calls him, the servant. This is my servant. So even the future Jesus is given the glorious but unexpected name of Aved. Because again, Aved is also used all the way through the Old Testament for servants, slaves, right? So it's used scores of times and all the time almost all the time for true servants, and now given to these. So now maybe you could jot a couple of these down. We won't look at all these, but you could look at Matthew 20 verses 25 to 28, where Jesus instructs, his disciples, you're to be servants of all. Philippians 2, right? Have this attitude in yourself that was in Christ Jesus. What is it? To be servant of all, to lay down your life, to be a servant of all. The one I'll have you turn to is John 13. Go to John 13. John 13, before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. That's really important, the way that John builds up this moment. It is in a moment that he's declaring Jesus is looking with the full extent of his love at his disciples at this family Passover feast. So when it was time for supper, the devil had already put into the heart of Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray him. Oh, Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands. He had come from God. He was going back to God. Like, never lost his mind who he was, who his position was as Messiah. So, verse 4, I love it. So, having all that in his mind, he got up from the supper, laid aside his outer clothing, took a towel, tied it around himself, poured water into a basin, and began to wash his disciples' feet and dry them with the towel tied around him. So he's giving them, later on, like verses 15, 16, all around in there, he's giving them an example of how we are to live, but he's taking on the role of servant. So I guess the reason I bring that up is I had angels in my mind and their service. We can't minimize in any, we can't overthink this, that our role, our chief role as followers of Christ is to be servants of all. And unfortunately, even in the church, pride and self-aggrandizement happens. We kind of want to be seen or be heard. It can happen in an extra group context or whatever. Even in Christian circles, we're not the first ones to serve, right? And we should be stung a little bit in our souls that the greatest beings created, angels, are the most eager when they're serving God and us. Moses, Joshua, and ultimately Jesus. Their chief role was to be servant of all. Jesus even gives us directly that command. You should be servant of all, right? So every time we find ourselves being put out if we have to serve or, find ourselves in our pride wanting to be served rather than to serve, I don't know, let the angels start that conviction in our souls and make it all the way to Jesus. Okay, maybe those images, almost forgot that I had those. So I go to Africa quite a bit, to Zambia, and I have learned clearly as much from my Zambian friends about the Lord as Tom Hammond or anybody else has guided me to know the Lord, and especially maybe in this model. Virtually all of my friends, hold on to that for just a second. Almost all of my friends get no pay for what they do as leaders, pastors, whatever. They are subsistence farmers, so they have enough land to feed their families, maybe enough to sell whatever else so that they can buy clothes for their kids to go to school or whatever. But they're just, and then they get on their bicycles and ride to the next village to share the gospel and start churches, and they're the most servant-hearted, and they're not doing it for any prestige or certainly any kwacha to put in their pockets. So a friend of mine does leather works and made those bracelets for me with a VED. And then when I got over there, you can go to the next one. I'm not sure what she's got here. Yeah, so I had a moment where I put these bracelets. Go to the next one and see if, I don't know if she has the one where I'm actually, oh yeah, this is, clearly one of these hands is not like the others. And these are the one, I don't know if she's got the one where I'm putting them on their wrists, maybe not. It doesn't matter if she doesn't. I took them into this little chapel thing that we helped build for them. It's just a mud brick thing. And I had all of them. I explained what Eved meant and from the Bible. And then I actually got on my knee and put one of those on each of their wrists. And then I said, well, I'm going to keep one and wear it on my wrist, but that's not because I've earned it. You guys have actually earned the title Eved right now. For me, I'm going to wear one to remind me to your example, so every time I see that, and then the bummer is just a couple weeks ago, I don't know if the snap broke or whatever, and I lost it, I can't find it, so I'm gonna have my friend make me a new one, but I gave those to them because I really do believe these guys shouldn't have to wait until they die to be called servant of the Lord. I think they have earned it right now, and so I just gave them that title of Ed, and you're just changed forever when you see people that really embody that deeply, biblical virtue of servanthood, and that's who they are for me. So, all right, let me pray for us and jump into our lesson for tonight. So, Lord, you alone are Lord, and it truly is our greatest joy when we're able to serve you, Lord, and the vast majority of times the way that we serve you is by serving the people around us. And by your Spirit, you have taught us that, and you give us, we're gratified when we do that. But Lord, often our sin just drags us back into that place where we'd rather be served than to serve. And we'd rather be known rather than to help somebody else be known. So I pray, God, that even as we consider the angels tonight, and as we consider just what it is to serve, that it would change us, that we would be really marked by that. And Lord, what an honor that would be if each of us in this room, when we died, if the other people around would just kind of in one voice say, oh, that was a servant. May that be our aspiration, not so that we would have the title, Lord, but that would be our life all the way until we breathe our last on this earth. That's what we would really long for, Lord. But only by your Spirit can you transform us to that. And we will war against it, Lord. We're just confessing right now. We will fight against that. So I pray that your Spirit would dominate us through the word, and we truly would become servants to honor you. We pray these things in Christ's name. All right, let's talk about creation tonight. I'm going to get you guys in some table discussion here in just a bit, but let's talk about creation. Next week, you are going to have the Honorable Brian Dermody come in. He's like twice my size, so let's keep that in mind. Kind of scary dude, but a gentle giant, very much a gentle giant. He's going to more specifically talk about the special creation of mankind, and even talk about gender and maleness and femaleness. And all that. It's all part of the creator order. So we're not going to talk much about the human side of creation, a little bit, and then he's going to do that next week, and your readings will tee that up. But I want you to go to Genesis 1 and 2 with me. We started our whole time in VST talking about Genesis a little bit, but I want us to go back there again. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, the question I've got in your notes, and this is the question that is often asked, is how long ago was this? When did Genesis 1 happen? If you are of a young earth persuasion, meaning that you think that, or interpret this, that these are literal days, 24-hour periods that he's describing in Genesis 1, it could be anywhere from guesses of 6,000 to 10,000 years ago by genealogies, etc. If you are more of an old earth person viewing Genesis 1, then we don't know, a long time ago, long time ago, right? And that would account for even, fossil records, etc. I'm often asked this question, as you can imagine, and honestly, I am fairly unconcerned about the answer of Genesis 1. I'm not terribly concerned. I, for a long time, was very persuaded as a young earth person. And I don't reject it at all. I think if I get to heaven and I find out that these are little 24-hour periods, I may be like, oh, that checks out. That makes sense. Conversely, if I get to heaven and no, that wasn't the point. It wasn't describing 24 hours. Sweet, that's fine with me too, right? The reason is that Genesis 1, no matter what your view of Genesis 1 is, there are some things that everybody should agree with. One is it's poetic in nature. It's got the rhythm of Hebrew poetry. There was there was evening, and then there was morning. Day one, there was evening, morning, evening, morning. So there's this rhythmic, poetic thing that could be literal or could just be literary beauty in describing this building process of creation and so forth. So for my own part, I won't try to argue you out of either of those views. As we mentioned in the first time we ever got together, there's a very big distinction between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Genesis 2, all of a sudden, it's kind of a hard stop on the poetic rhythms, and now he's like, oh, now let me tell you about the creation of mankind. So that's why I've got there in your notes, there is a necessity in my mind of a literal Adam and Eve. Whatever you do with the rest of the narrative and how old the heavens and the earth are, I don't think you can get away with imagining that Adam and Eve were suddenly evolved into what we would know of as Adam and Eve over millions of years. I believe that they were a direct creation in a moment. Adam and Eve were created. And the reason for that is the language itself in Genesis, number one. I think that makes the most sense of the description and the conversation that he has in real time with a real created being and the creation of Eve out of Adam and so forth. But then also, I want you to go into the New Testament with me to show you why I think it's really imperative with the rest of the scriptures that there is a literal Adam and Eve. So go to Acts chapter 17. And when Paul is at the Areopagus preaching to these total pagans about their unknown God, in verse 24 he says, the God who made the world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth. He does not live in shrines made by hands, neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to everyone life and breath and all things. And then look at this. From one man he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and boundaries where they live. He very explicitly, in bringing the gospel to them, part of the gospel message is God created you. This wasn't some accidental evolutionary process. There was a direct creation of one man, and all peoples around the earth, no matter what skin tone, language, culture, all came from a single man. Direct creation of God, Adam. Go to Romans 5. This gets even more direct. 5:12. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man and death through sin, in this way death spread to all people because all sinned. Okay, so definitely going back to Genesis 3, that there was a real human, not mythical, not just a story to kind of talk about where sin evolved from or whatever. No, there was one man and death came through his sin, and in this way death spread to all people. In fact, sin was in the world before the law, etc. Drop down to, 15 actually. The gift is not like the trespass, for if by one man's trespass the many died, how much more have the grace of God and the gift which comes through the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many. So now he's got this one man Adam, one man Christ thing going on. One man brought sin, one man is bringing salvation. So I'm just saying that whole thing kind of shatters and doesn't make sense unless there was an actual one man Adam, because we know there was this one man Christ, right? So the whole theology of Christ being the second Adam, right? 1 Corinthians 15 kind of language. This second Adam that will come on the scene, will actually tangle with Satan, but this time he's victorious and will end up, Genesis 3:15, take that whole scenario that's described back in Genesis 2 and 3, Jesus comes and fulfills. Well, if that is all myth, Genesis 2 and 3, then this doesn't make any sense in the unfolding story of salvation, right? Okay, I'm just going to pause right there because I wonder, you have a question on it?
When you say are you talking about like old earth theory as a whole, or as Adam being more than one person?
Here's what I'm saying is if you're an old earth person, meaning that you think that maybe other aspects of creation were created millions of years ago, thus we have fossil records, etc. Totally give way to that. I think it's essential that there be a one-man Adam, which would be, again, by the genealogies, 6,000+ years ago, as opposed to millions of years ago, that there was a direct creation of Adam, that he was not just evolved from millions of years, from one split cell, then some became elephants and some became mankind, right? That there was a literal human Adam. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? So whether heaven and earth before that, because, and some describe it, in your readings, you might have even said, like, there are some that even imagine maybe that something happened even between, this might sound crazy to you, but it's legit, between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Why does the language of the Hebrew language say that the earth was formless and void? It sounds chaotic, well, is that because there was stuff going on and caused chaos, and he's restarting everything? So could it be that some of those things were from before that time? There's all sorts of ways, many, right, to understand that perhaps Earth itself was older than the start of Adam and Eve and the storyline from Genesis 2, right? So, yeah. You want to add to that, Jonathan? Or, yeah.
Yeah. Could there be like an allowance of the creation of man being like the imparted consciousness into human form, but or human similarities, but wasn't human until an imparted consciousness and spirit and like ruah, like
So,
life?
yeah, the idea of that is that there were these humanoid evolved creatures, and what God did was actually just breathe a spirit into them. Thus, it's easier for me to imagine that there were other creatures that were humanoid-like. In other words, even now, like there are things like chimpanzees or whatever that are closer to humanity than snakes or whatever, right? So I get that is possible, that there were other, thus the fossil record of these other things that kind of looked human-like, missing link kind of things. I do think when you get to Genesis 2, that very explicit language of forming and shaping and then breathing into doesn't allow for that. That if there were those human-y creatures around, you know what I mean, that in the flood are no more, possibly. But as far as the Adam and Eve that is described in Genesis 2 and 3, I think is a direct creation.
Gotcha.
I
So
think that makes the most sense with the rest of the Bible too. Yeah.
do you think that eliminates the allowance of theistic evolution as a like theory that you can, maybe if you don't agree with it, but yet you can say, I could go to heaven and this would be what was explained to me, and I'd be like, oh, cool. So you've talked about young Earth, old Earth, but there's also theistic evolution in that mix.
Yeah, I would. Now, are there genuine Christians that are theistic evolutionists? Of course, right? I just respectfully think they're wrong. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying that because again, when you get to the New Testament, it's not just Genesis 1 and 2. Now we've got all these other passages that require a real Adam in my mind. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think theistic evolution fits the Genesis narrative or the rest. So, but again, all of us are going to get to heaven and be corrected in our theology, So I'm not kind of vaunting at that point, but I would have respectful disagreement, and I'd want to take them to task, I guess, a little bit. I'd want to open our Bibles together and be like, I don't know how that fits. How does that fit Romans 5? How does that fit 1 Corinthians 15? Were you going to say something?
Could you just clarify theistic evolution?
Oh, sorry, theistic. They want you to. What's theistic evolution?
So it's you can imagine evolution instead of this random process, but rather as like a car on a hill, at the top of a hill, that if you were to just put it in neutral and let it go, like there is no purpose or direction behind that beyond just it's going to like lose its energy. And instead of viewing evolution that way, it's rather evolution driven by God, as if like Noah's creation of the ark was not a like singular act, but creation over the course of the amount of like years it took for him to build that. And so it's the formation of humans and creatures over the course of millions of years with intention and direction, but done through evolution.
And usually those guys that hold that view will say something like, and then at one point, God gave the Spirit over to this one. And so that's the part that I would make a strong against. Now let me go back and say it's almost easier to believe what I'm saying, that Genesis 1 could describe millions of years and Genesis 2. But I want to give another nod to the new earth people, because one of the thoughts is, one of the ideas is he made creation with the appearance of age. And it's not because God was deceptive, it's because when he created trees, he didn't create acorns and then wait 100 years until it grew. He created trees that theoretically didn't have rings in them, okay? Or they did have rings in them because he wanted them to be fully developed trees, as they would be, even though they were a second old, they looked like they were 100 years. Adam looked like a 24-year-old or whatever, you know what I mean? Like he had the appearance of age, he's like 1 second old. So I'm just saying, young earth people aren't just fighting fundy people that just refuse to, deal with science or something like that. There probably are those out there. But I'm saying some of them have some really good arguments for new earth, right? So I don't want to minimize either one of those. I think whoever you are, however you get to Genesis 2, that's where I would draw the line and say we have to have a literal Adam and Eve. Yeah.
Like one quick more stab. Okay. The idea of death with, again, you're talking about the allowance of old earth creation in the millions of years prior to Adam and Eve. So if that were the case and there is vegetation, there is life, how can death have been introduced to the world through Adam and Eve if there were millions of years of life?
So behind Jonathan's question is this idea that death came as a result of sin. Like death didn't exist. I do believe that what he's talking about is the death of humanity, because imagine this, we don't know how long they were in the garden before Genesis 3 in the fall. But every time they ate an apple, they killed that apple, right? So death was happening, whether in the animal world, tree world, fruit world, whatever. I don't think that it's that death itself didn't exist. I think when he says, on the day you eat, you shall die, and death came to all men, and creation itself then went on a spiral of death because of sin. But there was still death that went on. It's just the humanity. So,
and that's purely, is that physical and spiritual, or could that just be spiritual alone?
Well, no, I do think it's both.
Separation, as in.
Totally. Now, the reason they didn't just die in that moment, it's all, we do this in English also, where if you do something egregious to me, I might just say, you're a dead man. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to kill you in this moment, but at some point and soon, I will kill you. You know what I mean? Like, it's not an empty threat, and it's not that God was fibbing or you know what I mean? They knew the death sentence was coming. On that day, they will surely die. The death sentence was over them, and even now we have people on death row, And so they're as good as dead, but it might be years even before they actually die. So I think it was both physical and spiritual. So you've got there just that reminder, Genesis 2, Elohim, and then Yahweh when mankind is created, etc. So I want to talk a little bit about non-biblical perspectives of anthropology, like the study of man. Because here's my contention. The reason that God starts with Genesis 1 and 2 is if we get that wrong, you guys, everything goes wrong. If we don't embrace that there's a creator, that seems as Christians, that can almost seem like, yeah, we all get that. No, I'm saying if you reject that, if you just reject Genesis 1 and 2, forget the Jesus dying on the cross for your sins, forget, all the other things in the Bible. If you dispute that, everything falls from there. So what I've got there are views that reject Genesis 1 and 2 and where that takes you, okay? So the first one is man is a machine. In your blank, that's a machine. Mao Zedong, the founder of the Communist Party in China. Peasants were a means to serve the cause of the revolution. The revolution was not a means to serve the interest of the peasants, right? So if you're Mao Zedong and others like him, man's a machine. And I've got this goal, I've got this vision for what society should be like, and actually you don't have much other value to me. There's no image of God in you, right? You're a means to my end. Okay, the next one is a social animal. Maybe some of you guys were psychology or even sociology majors. Skinner is a big name there. He's an atheist behavioral scientist. So by a social animal, as an atheist, he would just say that we have this uncommon need for social interaction. And so a lot of his behavioral science thing is how to kind of shame people into doing what's right, etc. But there's no soul in us. We're just social animals. Next one is a sexual being. This would be Sigmund Freud, who dominated the psychiatry scene for years and years. Only in the last 10 has he gone more into dispute, but really shaped the world as we know it. The behavior of a human being is being in sexual matters is often a prototype for the whole of his other modes of reaction in life. So he made a lot about our sexuality, and even as infants, and it got really bizarre and really, but it shaped, you guys, I'm telling you, don't just imagine, some old codger or some dusty book in a bookshop. Like, his ideas permeated culture, that we are by nature sexual beings, and thus we got things like the sexual revolution and all sorts of stuff. Like, it was very consequential. The next one, economic being. This is pure Marxism, economic being. So even after Marx put Lenin and Stalin in Russia and the Soviet Union, because they were the ones that especially took Marxism. Like Mao Zedong and others had Marxist ideas, but these were the guys that were the blue bloods, I guess. I don't know if you are aware of this, but you could jot this in. It's estimated that somewhere between 60 and 100 million human deaths occurred in the 20th century purely from Lenin and Stalin and their application of Marxism. Somewhere between 60 and 100 million human deaths. Again, it's because they were trying to build an economy and revolution, and all those deaths were just unfortunate results of getting this thing put into place to rule the world through this economy. So that was Karl Marx, his contribution. Next one is a pawn of the universe. A pawn. The guy, the way you pronounce his last name is Camus, this French guy, Albert Camus. This is existentialism. If you've heard of existentialism or absurdism, which I've got that word in the very next thing. Absurdism states that the universe is irrational and meaningless. So it is pawns. It states that trying to find meaning leads people into conflict with seemingly meaningless world. So have you guys ever read The Plague, or did you have to read The Plague in a lit class in high school or anything like that? It's a fairly short story. I really dig Camus. It's really dark. It's really godless. Not like sexual or something. I'm just saying it's weird, but he's a great writer. Anyway, this book, The Plague. Here's the last paragraph. And indeed, as he listened to the cries, it was this doctor, as he listened to the cries of joy rising from the town, Rue remembered that such joy is always imperiled. He knew that these jubilant crowds did not know, but could have learned from books, that the plague, bacillus, never dies or disappears for good, that it can lie dormant for years and years in furniture and linen chests, that it bides its time in bedrooms, cellars, trunks, and bookshelves, and perhaps the day would come when, for the bane and the enlightening of men, it roused up its rats again and sent them forth to die in a happy city.
Oh my.
That's the joyful stuff of Camus. Here's what he said. There was this plague. There's these people trying to stop the plague. And I mean, this is way before COVID. So you can imagine, people with COVID running and grabbing the plague. And at the end, they finally get this plague, kind of calmed down or whatever. And the last thing is, oh, no, don't worry, it's coming back. You're all dead. You know, like it's just that it's a meaningless. Don't try to find meaning. In fact, if you try to find meaning, you're going to go crazy. So just live, forget it, you know. The next one is a free being, that the I guess, highest aspiration is just to be a free being. Ayn Rand, her writings were all novels. Objectivism is another word. You can put that underneath there. Objectivism, the concept of a man as a heroic being with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life. In other words, we're just supposed to be self-made, and we can step on others. You strongly rejected altruism. She hated altruism, altruism is doing something nice for other people. Selfless acts, okay? Strongly rejects any kind of mercy or altruism, because we're all supposed to be kind of stepping on each other, because I'm a free being and I just got to rise to the top. I'm trying to remember the names of her books. I read a couple of her novels too. What are they called? Oh, doesn't matter. You don't need to read her. She's a great writer, kind of like him. The next one is a special being. A special being. Thomas Carlyle was a deist, so this would be like a common deist. He is of the earth, but his thoughts are with the stars. Mean and petty his wants and desires, yet they serve a soul exalted with grand, glorious aims, with immortal longings, with thoughts which sweep the heavens and wander through eternity. A pygmy standing on the outward crust of this small planet, his far-reaching spirit stretches outward to the infinite, and there alone finds rest. But in his mind, a true deist, but you can't really find God. You've rejected Jesus. Remember, like Thomas Jefferson that went through his Bible and took out all the supernatural and all that stuff. That would be a true deist. Like, there's no supernatural, there's no anything, but there's a God. You know, you can see that in deist. Like, there's this God out there, but he's untouchable or whatever. But we should aspire, at least. We're special people, but he's out there, the watchmaker or whatever. We'll never get to know. Whereas a biblical anthropology, here in the next thing, Genesis, God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." Like that's one verse that's a biblical anthropology, right? Augustine said this: "Man is a good thing spoiled." I love that. Augustine almost always wrote way more. Like if you try to read City of God or whatever, I've got a PhD seminar that I'm going to be teaching this fall, and I make them read City of God, and because I had to. No, what kind of? No, he's a brilliant guy, but but every now and then he'll write, this little 6-word thing. Man is a good thing spoiled. All that. Erickson says the doctrine of humanity has an unusual status. Here, the student of theology is also its object. Student is the object. I like that. Schaeffer in this next one. Man in God's image, made in God's image, man was made to be great. He was made to be beautiful. He was made to be creative in life and art. His rebellion has led him into making himself into nothing but a machine. Francis Schaeffer really wanted to bring the dignity of arts back into the Christian community, because as we are brought back into life in Christ, we should explore creativity and etc. If you're into art, if you ever want to find Francis Schaeffer's, is it How Should We Then Live? How Should We Then Live? Where he follows Western culture through the arts. It's fantastic. You can even go on YouTube, and he'll go into these art studios and show man rebirthed and expressing true image of God in art. Fascinating stuff. Even though he's a philosopher. And then Schaeffer and then Everett Koop. If man is not made in the image of God, nothing then stands in the way of being humanity. There is no good reason why mankind should be perceived as special. Human life is cheapened, as we saw in that whole list of, right? We can see this in many of the major issues being debated in our society today. Abortion, infanticide, euthanasia. You guys, euthanasia, I just read this article about Canada, how Canada has so relaxed the laws. So they've had assisted suicide for a long time now in Canada. And it has gotten to the point where if you just are in depression, on the front end was supposed to be if you're like stage 4 cancer, it racked with pain, and medications were keeping you alive, then you could have somebody come in and help you die, right? It almost seemed noble in some ways, right? Oh, it's gone way past that. Now people that just want to die, and you just have to have 2 different physicians come in and verify. Like this euthanasia thing, when several years ago when we'd hear about this, it just was like horrific. Like who would do that? How barbaric is this? And now, not only Canada, but in the US, euthanasia is becoming a thing but a lot of this comes back to, do we value human life? Abortion on the other end of life, like, is that life? Is it worth preserving and protecting and honoring? You know what I mean? Yes, if we're Christians and believe Genesis, yes, life is to be protected and honored and you know. So he's saying abortion, infanticide, euthanasia, the increase of child abuse, violence of all kinds, pornography and its particular kinds of violence as evidence in sadomasochism, the routine torture of political prisoners in many parts of the world, the crime explosion, the random violence which surrounds us. Well, all that comes as people reject the dignity of mankind as created in the image of God, right? So that whole kind of Pandora's box of evil toward man against man explodes on the world if we don't get that right. Yeah. Starting the class off real happy. So I'm going to let you guys let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 16 of you. So why don't we get in groups of 4? Okay, so like you 4 get together, you 4, like you 4, and then Katie, you can come up with these guys. So I've got the table discussion questions. In sharing the gospel, how important is it that you establish a proper view of God? But expand on your answer. Don't just, repeat that step by step. How important is it? Yeah, very. Okay, I got that one. And then the next one, how should Christ followers position themselves relative to the created world? Consider, how do Christians get this wrong in our day? In other words, we might think because either our highest position at the top of the rank of all creation, creation just is there to serve us, right? So we can do whatever we want. Or on the other hand, we value it so highly, right, that that becomes our highest good. So I'm just saying there are extremes, all sorts of those. I'm just off the top of my head. How do we think about the created world as Christians, and how do we maybe get that wrong, and using Genesis 1 and 2 to help us? Okay, so those are a couple discussion questions. I'll give you some time to think about those, and I've got another one for our whole room to talk about. So go ahead and recluster and think out loud with each other from your readings and time in the Word.
Answer your question though, young Earth, I was an animal ecology degree at Ohio State, and very challenged by a lot of the viewpoints that professors had given.
Sweater, now I'm like, should have brought it. I was like,
In professors, I was
actually air conditioned in here.
I should see
I'm glad he said that because
it was this way this morning. I was like, it's like a meat locker in here.
it is cold.
I met a microbiologist who was on campus.
Just said that too.
With the foundation of at least.
This is the temperature of Veritas here. Freezing there.
And I was like ready to grill him, and like not like in a mandatory way, but like I was just like felt like I was spiraling and didn't know what to do.
It's fine.
So that you are aware, like whether you believe young Earth or old Earth, like this conversation should be based around the fact that this does not define our faith, and that because we are establishing that now we have the opportunity to be curious, but not need of answer. Like we can be curious. It is a good thing to be curious, but we do not have to have a solid, like, this is the answer and there's no other possibilities for that. In fact, Deuteronomy talks about that we were created often to permit the unknown, that's part of our nature. Things that we'll never know. Things that we do know, we're called
spirits and everything.
responsible with. So that's kind of been my story with it.
Taking a way out.
I
They're a bad
went
omen.
into the theistic evolutionary like perspective as like that was my stance.
An answer.
And then for the last probably like 5 or 6 years have been just like so like when I build up the maybe momentum to like
Really hard for me.
be curious again in that like wrapped the back and forth of older those theistic elements of I feel like some don't do timeline well when it comes to it's millions of years. I don't think you can just call that adaptation. I think there are small changes that lead to larger changes. And,
Okay, because like I was gonna say, it's like obviously you like
I don't know. I guess that's kind of my stance. Is I'm stuff that I'm at war with.
in the gospel.
I don't have like a this is my solid stance, but I was so abusive in regards to like the science of young Earth creationism in high school. Like this is it. Nothing else is right. Because people were questioning that or
It was like honor.
challenging my viewpoint. It was they were challenging my faith. That meant they were at the core of my identity. So that's been my background with it.
And we are guilty.
Yeah.
Recognize our sin.
That's because I'm pretty
Yep. Yep.
makes a lot more.
For sure. Yeah, the aspect of death has been one that has been a challenge in the last 3 or 4
Whenever
years.
you're talking about like
Trying to figure out more or less it's like how like that had to have been occurring if millions of years prior to Adam and Eve.
In chapter 15, it like talks
like
about different.
anthropology studies of like
It was
there's
basically
never been a time that humans were the lowest amount of people. And
Struggle with.
we do not have come from just
I don't spend a lot of time.
people and like built the like diverse genetic structure that we have now, like all these things that again are things to be curious about, but I have to like pace myself because I will quickly go back to that kind of spiraling mentality of whether you're younger, older, or theistic, like there's always gonna be elements that I'm not 100% like confident with. You know, that we need to be lifelong learners, you know, and settle or to be confident means that I don't know what I don't know. That needs to be
I was like, I wish I would have.
We don't have a proper understanding of it. And I think it also shows
have more on that later.
why we can trust the Bible.
In sharing the gospel, how important is it that you establish a
Just
proper
felt so much like I had more clarity.
explain your answer?
Supernatural about his
Span of a million years or, you know, worry about
About
it.
creation here.
trustworthiness and also like
When you're getting that whole like
I'm going to dig deep on matters
we
that
are created beings, we are sinful, like we
thought that was
death into this world, like all these things. If you don't give a full scope of the gospel, what happened? What have you seen happen? I know I've limited elements of the gospel because I was nervous
Exactly.
about the abrasiveness
I was like-
of it, or the like obstacle.
I don't know if that's-
it should rightfully be. Like it is not a easy on ramp to
Yeah.
How we got there?
life with God.
It's important,
It
but it's not
challenges
going
and
with this. Never happens when you lose this. I hate that so much.
idea of
When you get older.
Oh my gosh, it happened.
flesh out who God is.
my own
Someone who
place to like play with, and I'm a good
another
person saying like now you're telling me all that is wrong and I'm immoral and I'm depraved, you know, like all these things. The gospel,
Having a high God and
its true form, to challenge and be like very explicit in a lot of ways. As life-giving as it is,
high and holy view.
when we like respond to
It's actually about
like what gives life and purpose, like I mean it's a knife, you know, to the gut. So,
You're not the point. God is the point.
you think of any ways that like you've limited
It's not about us.
in a like lesser form because of nerves or
Christ from the earth.
embarrassment or like
Anybody ask you where to get?
Instead of these kind of, we're not dependent upon us. And
Sure I have. Elvis.
he didn't have to create us. He didn't have to.
Have that faith.
When I was early on, like
I think that's why we're here.
moving into this, I was lost quickly over the
We also get so,
into this world, and we
yeah, like the dreams, like
tell like
so caught up.
all these things and
So many
kind of quickly like skip over that. But
things
spa dealing with
that we get really, really passionate
is it ended up being more
about.
skip over that because it was a rug pull later,
In our
more involved in church if that was a choice that they made,
reminisced.
and then discussion was made had whether it's like Sunday morning sermon about what sin has brought into the world to preserve, and in their mind they're going like
I'm like, yeah, like it's good to care.
I thought this was just like
Our ultimate weird thing.
while Jesus came to earth for me and like he loves me and wants what's best for me.
Thinking of being good too much, but at the same time keeping a right
Impact that Christ's death.
eternity.
If we don't have a true understanding of like our brokenness, our sinfulness,
Of identity and climate.
matter.
We don't even realize like how.
I feel like that has a lot to do with this conversation. It's like the first thing that came to think of. It's like good or
I think second,
topic. I like
How we kind of get to those, or how.
how should Christ followers position themselves relative to
This is my channel. Our world.
Yeah, but it's like we used to ask that same question.
in our day?
Like giant chunk of our class, of our like science. Like, how did we get science?
It's like it's just like
It's just really hard for me because like true, buddy.
A lot of it is, I feel like Christians.
Yeah, I'm not perspective. It was just like I think actually shattered. Like, where did we come from? Of like how I live. I just think it's even like read a book actually. Like be called. Like we don't challenge. What is it? I've seen that. Yeah. It was super.
Think about like the world.
Whatever. Did you like it? Fine. Listen to it. Yeah, I was gonna read it. I saw it on my audiobook app.
There's a book that I really enjoy,
She basically
Stewards of Eden.
one of her daughters. Like
It's like a green and blue kind of book.
how should Christians themselves relative
The author. I
And Christ followers.
perspective of it
crazy.
challenging
Like I don't know.
this idea that
Consider how
Christians are locked into this wrong political.
So who's ever got the floor, I'll let you wrap up or whatever, and then we're gonna.
I want. If I wanted
to be
I think I would.
do
I would
Earth.
like I'm dying like anxiety because of it.
The Earth is not domination.
I would disassociate.
Use of these
I feel like
to be responsible of. And just because the Earth is going to be, it's by Sandra.
I was in England with like
wait, is that case for
Because the Earth is to be renewed and restored, I mean that we should
stuff like
burn
that.
it
Listening to it right now.
around until that point. You know what I mean?
the way it's worded?
It's scientific.
What a call it is to be
All these perfect things.
serving, you know, against something greater than our own life. To say like
Astronomy, cosmetology.
everything in moderation is a huge tenet of the Bible, and what
but then
what
culturally we should.
the opposite of
Break in here and just stay where you are for a second. And the first one, we don't need to talk about too much. I hope there's a little bit more self-evident to that. But the reason I put that question in there is even maybe you've heard me talk about this guy that I meet with every week, read through the Bible, help him to come to know Christ. He continues to want to talk about just the universe. Well, I know you talk about Jesus, but for me, it's the universe. And the constant theme is, no, that what you call the universe doesn't exist. There is no universe. Jesus Christ created everything. You got to deal with Jesus. So I'm just saying, like, our zeal in our modern or in our day is always obviously to get people to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior, right? We want to get them to that threshold where but unless they deal with Genesis 1 and 2, unless they first understand they are a created being and will stand before a person, God, all the story about Jesus doesn't make sense, right? None of it will catch on. So I'm just saying the gospel starts with Genesis 1 and 2, and you can certainly tell them about Jesus and talk about other things, but I'm saying their understanding of the gospel is hung up if they don't believe in a personal God that has created us, right? So anyway, on that, oh yeah, go ahead.
When you started meeting with this guy, would you change your mind now and start in Genesis 1 and 2 rather than?
Actually, we did. But here's what's cool. Here's what's crazy about that, though, is that he was the one that changed. So I wanted to start with John, and he said, "Wait, I want to start with the hard things because I think there's some things in the Bible that I think we should start from the very beginning." And so he was actually the one, and then I was like, "Dude, brilliant." Actually, that is 100% true. We should start in Genesis. So I felt a little bit like, whew, And then, but the cool thing is, then you go to John 1. So then our next time was John 1. And it starts with the Genesis 1 language all over again about Jesus. I'm like, see how important this is? You have to, So anyway, yeah.
He's still in the universe.
Oh, well, he's at least, here's what this is good for me to have somebody like this in my life because, he is eager. Like when he can't meet this week, and he was texting me last night, like, I can't. Oh man, I'm gonna miss our. Like he's legitimately, not just to have conversation, like Bible's open, you know what I mean, but the actual act of like regeneration of salvation is such a spiritual thing. Like I feel like I keep wanting to just push him over the line. You know what I mean? Like convince him in any given week. I feel like this is it. I'm gonna nail it this time. And you just realize it's a supernatural spiritual thing. Like he has to repent and believe in his soul. And so my prayer has just been, God, I'm gonna keep feeding the Word. Like the Word is powerful, right? I'm just gonna keep my Bible open, tell him. But ultimately, it's the Holy Spirit that has to like convict him of his sin, and so there's other things going on in his life now that I think are making things unstable, and I hope are actually the result.
How did you meet this guy? Like, how did this start?
Actually,
He has them.
he's a trainer at a gym I go to, and so he actually. Sorry, this is way off topic. We're going to get to John Mark Yates, but he actually interviewed me on. So great. He has this podcast, or did, he quit it. Had this podcast called Douchey Gym Bros.
I remember talking about this.
Yeah. So the reason I don't let people know about this, like just if you go to Douchey Gym Bros, you're gonna see the little E with a circle around it because he and his buddy that interviewed me, they use explicit language. It wasn't mine. But because we've had those kind of conversations, they actually let me have that whole conversation even in this episode of the podcast. So he's genuinely interested. I'm not soft selling it or yeah, he's genuinely interested, but it's not this like I got the answers, man. I wrote the book on the gospel, whatever it was. No, I didn't. Jesus wrote the book on the gospel. You know what I'm saying? Anyway. Back to that second part there. How do Christians, get off? How do we? What are the ditches that Christians can fall in if we don't have a proper view of our role with creation? What do you guys think about it? Yeah.
Well, when we were talking about this, the question that came to my mind a little bit, the question that came to my mind was just how as Christians we should view climate change, because I I was an ed major.
In this room tonight, for instance.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go on.
I was an ed major, and so I had to take classes on how to teach science basically to students, and we spent weeks and weeks and weeks on climate change, and it was just this very just really negative, the world is dying, we're killing the earth, everything's terrible, it's our fault, this really just negative. Anyways, so I really wrestled with that of what's our job as Christians to
Yes,
steward,
good call.
yeah,
for sure.
well, but also this isn't our home, so we should care about it, but also we're not here for. What's your
That's legit. That's legit. The one thing I'd say is I think for Christians to have a humble posture, nobody in this room is a hard scientist when it comes to like ecology and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so let's just first understand that there are things that we probably shouldn't be too quick to speak of, either in rejecting climate change or accepting it full. We're like, there's all sorts of nuances, I'm assuming, in that science. So like, let's stick with what we know, like the Bible, you know what I'm saying? And not try to, that's one thing I think Christians can do, is all of a sudden speak too quickly into things like beyond our pay grade or what we've been given. I honestly, when I talk to people about those kind of things, I'm like, man, I'll say something like that. That's really over my pay grade. I really don't know much about that. But I do know, I think it's really tragic when humans deface it. Like right now in Zambia, the Chinese are coming in and they're trying to get manganese, which is for batteries and stuff. I don't even understand all this. But they do strip mining to get this manganese. And when you see just the vandalism of a beautiful place, you know what I mean? You do think, shouldn't we care more about that? And it's not just Chinese doing that in Zambia. We've done that in the US, right? So I'm just saying, I think it's okay for us to be like, man, look, we should care about this beautiful, beautiful creation God's given to us, right? And try to take care of it. But these things come and go. Like when I was growing up, the biggest thing was overpopulation. If we don't stop recreating humans, we're going to run out of food supply. And we're going to. There was all the same doom and gloom that you were taught. All of our teachers. I mean, it was, we got to stop having so many babies. And now we can't. We're not keeping up. And so now, I'm hearing all these podcasts. There was a recent one, Ross Douthat just had this podcast with a guy. And, already Japan, Italy, a couple other countries the arc is too far. They can't change it back. The only means of getting enough population to just run their country is by immigration. They've gone past the point of birthing enough babies. But lots of other countries are heading that way, you know what I mean? So,
the dying of the human race, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a legit, like, the depopulation of the world is legit. And so even that goes back to, do we, as Christians then, when he says, to populate the earth, for man to come to woman and have babies, I do think, not that every single soul has to, and there's good reasons why some people either cannot, right, or whatever. But the main, channel that we should be in as Christians is we should love children. We should want to bring children into the world and teach them about Jesus, and So I'm just saying, when it comes to climate change, I think, there are some things that seems like, oh man, I'll give that to you. Now, whether the whole meta of climate change is accurate or not, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if any of the rest of you have more that you'd add to that, or how you would come to that. Because there's stuff going on, right? I mean, the droughts in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a lot of things going on that are, at least in recorded history, different than what the climate used to do. So it's like, something's going on. Are we at fault? I don't know. What all forces,
But even if we are, as Christians, shouldn't we believe that is
more
in line somewhat with it?
At the very least, admit that, oh man, sin in this world does awful things, and whether that's because of man's, like I was saying, the strip mining, all this. Even in a city that I drive through to get up to the Hope Center, there is lead poisoning because of the mining that happened there. It's the second largest city in Zambia, and the lead poisoning is so deep in the soil and into the water sources that children have cancer at this extreme. It was on 60 Minutes. And I drive through this city every time I go up there. So I'm just saying, those times, like, hey, Christians, we should care about that. You know what I mean? Like, now I can't control how that lead got in there, and there's no extracting lead back out once it gets in there. And so it's kind of like, what do you depopulate 1 million people? Like, it's a really hard choice. But I think to be able to say, yeah, at some point you're like, look, how can we just respond appropriately? Like, I can't turn the clock back or undo some of these things, but how can we? Because I think sometimes Christians are too galvanized hard in like, that's a hoax, we're not, or whatever. And I'm like, well, maybe some of it, there's extremists in every cause, right? So yeah, maybe some of it's overstated and blah, 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 but we can see with our own eyes some of those things that we shouldn't do. You know what I mean? We should stop doing that stuff, you know? So.
I think one thing on the climate change topic, and with the example you shared, is like the push to save the planet, but then how they want to make batteries with those, what they're mining, batteries for green energy so they can store energy easier. So it's like you actually can very much hurt a lot of people, and a lot of developing countries get hurt by the push for climate change. Right. And so taking a more holistic approach as Christians to be like, yes, we want to steward the environment, but we also want to take care of people and make sure they're not getting cancer.
Bingo. If we have a high view of humanity, exactly right. Because like you're saying, it's precise. You know, China is rich in technology, incredibly poor in natural resources. Their entire nation, very, very poor. So they go to places like Africa, who are very poor in technology, but rich in, that continent is loaded with natural resources. But people get hurt, right? And so that's where you're like, wait, our impulse is we believe all those are image bearers. We care about all those children who are now dying of lead poisoning. We care about the people, you know, to make batteries, whatever, you know. Yeah, good call. That should be our concern. How can we protect the lives of humans? Yeah. Any other thoughts besides even just climate change and all that? Any other ways that conversation went? But the repopulating of the earth, that's legit. If you're interested, that Ross Douthat, he's actually a New York Times guy, but he's a Catholic, he's a Christian guy, had his most recent, I can't remember even what his podcast, that was with a guy talking about the necessity, you gotta have children, calling on Christians especially, like, you gotta have kids, like this is.
What's the guy's name?
Ross Douthat, it's Douthout, and I can't remember the guy that he, yeah, I can give it to you later, or maybe I can send it out to everybody if you're interested in it, but some pretty hard. The other thing I wanted, and those that read this because you're in the taking it for credit. By the way, the guy that wrote this, I'd kind of forgotten, John Mark Yates, he and I used to teach the seminar that I now teach. We used to teach that together. So I texted him, I sent him a picture of his chapter. I'm like, dude, we're talking about your chapter. He's like, oh, I forgot I wrote that. I should read that again. You should, it was a good one. Okay, how does a proper view of creation impact how we think about, he gave as examples, slavery, abortion, and missions. So if you read this book, those are, how does a proper view of humanity, slavery, abortion, missions, what do you think? If we really believe Genesis 1, it should change how we think about those things. Take the easiest one maybe, slavery. How would a proper view of the image of God in people shape our view of slavery? We shouldn't do it, right? Like we shouldn't enslave other people. And unfortunately, there were people who held their Bibles high in America's version of slavery, which is maybe some of the most abusive of the world. Right? There's slavery in the Old Testament, etc., even New Testament. But a lot of that was a different kind of slavery than the chattel slavery that we had in the U.S. But a lot of the people that were proponents of that held Bibles in their hands, right? And so that's one of those things that it's hard to look back in history and see them actually using the Bible to justify enslaving Africans and even saying that they actually were beneath being image bearers and those kind of things. So some of those absurdities, obviously, we need to reject. But you guys, we have also in our day sex trafficking, and there are more people enslaved. You guys know that there's more people enslaved today than there ever has been in the history of the world. So it's not that we've grown out of that, we've just become more sophisticated and underground about it. don't know that that means that every Christian should be an activist for every one of these causes, but we should be concerned, and some of us should become activists. Like, some of us should do more, you know what I mean? Like, not everybody should go to the rural parts of Zambia, but somebody should, right? And so I'm just saying, like, some of these causes should stir some of us to say, I should do more than just look at all the different options for protecting humanity. Too many, I'll just not do anything. Oh, well, do something, you know, and I think that's legit. But then all the way to missions, right? Like, if we really believe that everybody on this planet is an image bearer, then we also believe that one man, Adam, took them into sin, and one man, Jesus, can rescue them from that. That same message that Paul was taking to pagans in Athens, you know, we should take to the ends of the earth, right? So it should, again, Genesis 1 really impacts a whole lot of things that we should be about. Anything else come out of were you going to say something?
So, like, all three of those positions of slavery or missions or abortion, like, I feel like that's, for me, a reminder of, like, emotions as a, like, God-given, like, trait to utilize, to bring to the Lord, and anger being especially one of those of, like, protectiveness, of like keeping something sacred, whether that's like human life, or the value of that. And so, you know, the whole someone should do something about that can often stir, you know, a Christian to be like, well, I don't see this right now, like, who is doing this? And thus, like, the anger or the, like, protectiveness of, like, I do want, like, I will be that if it takes that, you know, there's an element of I've always grown up seeing anger as this, like, negative, you know, traits to suppress, but, you know, you see obviously with Christ flipping tables, like, there is an element of that that is righteous, you know, that is restorative, if it's utilized in the right direction. So anger, honestly, it's a huge reason why some of these things have been at least lessened over the course of time.
Yeah, if you read like a biography of William Wilberforce, you know, as he tried to stop slavery in the UK, and eventually it spilled over into American stuff, they were pretty bold, you know what I mean? And they believed in it enough. Same thing with who was had the orphanage in the UK, and who was it?
George Mueller?
Yeah, George Mueller. You know, when he saw these poor children that were put in all these, you know, work camps and everything else, and he's trying to rescue them, point them to Christ, and, you know, there was an anger in him, like, how are we doing this to the, can you imagine these little children, you know, like Veritas kids, and somebody comes and puts them in the back of a truck off to a work, you know, they're like, somebody should be mad about this, we can't just let this go on, you know, and so, yeah. Lydia, did you have something you were saying?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, on the topic of, like, foster care and adoption, it's near and dear to my heart because my younger sister is adopted, and we got her as a foster placement at like 3 months old, and then later on adopted her. But it's like a great representation of like how we are as Christians are adopted into God's family, which is like so tender and sweet. But it's also heartbreaking because like she was 3 months old, like she was born addicted to meth because of what her mom was doing when she was pregnant with her, or like, I don't know, things like that. Ultimately, because I'm a sibling of like someone that's adopted, I get a lot of questions of like if I want to adopt someday too, which like I will never say no to that. But my question really is like, how do you discern what is your mantle to charge and be like, no, I'm gonna die on this hill and like go after this really hard? Because like, yes, we should be loving and caring to everybody, but sometimes that's like, oh, this person should just be a foster parent.
Right.
Or like sometimes this person should adopt, or like this person should go to a third world country, or you know, like what does that look like?
Here's what's hard is, like I was even saying before, like sometimes churches will kind of bring in different speakers for all sorts of different causes, one of which is, you know, foster care adoption. And the guilt trip goes on everywhere. We should do all the above, you know?
It gets overwhelming.
It gets overwhelming. You know, Teresa and I were foster parents for many years and then chose to stop, let our license lapse again. And I think for good reasons that we were and good reasons that we stopped. I think but here is, again, my appeal would be, though, for all of us to really make it a matter of prayer to say, again, I can't take on, I gotta not have a messianic, like, I'm gonna solve all the sins of the world, you know? I'm not the Messiah, but I'm one person with agency and a real person in a real town. So whether that's some help at Faith Academy for some of these kids, you know, or for others it's abortion issues, for others it's, you know, there's so many ways that we can actually find the flourishing of humankind in a way that's, you really can make a difference. Like you really, you know, I just read another book not long ago. A guy at the gym told me about tuberculosis. Like, well, that's a page turner, but it actually is. Like, he put it in story form. There are people dying all over the world. And so I was talking to a doctor here, a doctor friend of mine, a pediatrician. I was talking about this book. I thought he'd be interested. He goes, "Oh, we've got a tuberculosis outbreak in Ottumwa right now." I'm like, "What? Who's heard of tuberculosis in the United States in the last?" But a group of immigrants who had not been exposed to it, got exposed to it, and now people who a couple generations, like, we don't even get tuberculosis. There is no vaccine for it. I don't remember. Anyway, we don't anymore because we wiped it out in the U.S. So now there's a lot of people who are getting tuberculosis here. Anyway, I'm just saying, like, I can't stop, but maybe there's one of these things out there that we could do something about, you know what I mean? But yeah, I agree. We can't just take on the sins of the whole world. And, but we should care about this stuff, you know what I mean? And I do think sometimes Christians are, maybe sometimes justifiably, it's all gonna burn, so we just don't care about all this, let's just preach the gospel and it's all gonna burn. And I'm like, well, Jesus seemed to care about a lot of things as he was going to be the Lamb of God that would take away the sins of the world. He did actually notice the people around and care and engage and respond. Okay, even though Alyssa's not here tonight, she did bring a quiz vicariously through me. It's a pretty short one, so let's do that, and then I'll let you guys take a quick break. We might even get out a little early tonight, maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. But I'm gonna pass this quiz around, and then as you get done, though, go ahead and grab one of those bars back there. Maybe some coffee, even if not, some tea, just to warm up by the cup. Whatever you want to do. So take this, kind of just flip it over or whatever, and then you can take a break. So you can hold the pen.
Yeah, basically.
You're not going to take the quiz? Is that what
I'm going to grade them.
Gonna skip.
Thank you.
Catch my death in a cold. Nothing's happening. It's AI, it's taken over. So you guys heading back or are you spinning it?
Just keep going. She was in Kathy. She's on her way.
Like,
Oh, so you just came down. I thought you were up there with her.
Just didn't work.
Somebody does. Yeah,
Anybody in the track team?
It's been doing that a while.
she has, yeah.
I don't know if they still go. Still will go.
I'm sure.
There were last year.
It's not bad, especially
You
now.
know who they
We've only been,
How many kids you got?
we've got
Ollie. Those are the two that I know.
Do you know?
They're friends with one of my good friends.
Do you know Austin Bush?
I know, yes, I know of them.
You do.
Honestly, that is the way it works.
Rachel lived with Lauren and a bunch of other girls.
Yeah, she's only been doing.
Because my boyfriend is going to be on the throws team this fall as a junior. He's a transfer from Indian Hills.
Blood pumping.
Okay.
And so he's planning to come here to
Yeah.
like church and fall and stuff. He's curious already. Like, yeah, I know he goes. I didn't know like
He's pretty solid.
a lot of people say, oh yeah, I go to salt company. Okay, especially from Ames though.
Or it might have been 3 times.
Exactly, and you're like, oh yeah, I go to Poland.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, but
go pretty regular. I know they're really solid. I also know 6:30. Person how the track team. My husband's like roommates got married. They lived with
yeah, whatever.
I do not.
Yeah, I just know the throws team pretty well.
Yeah, we'll be honest.
And he's living with a guy, Sean Smith.
Oh, that's why.
He's like Catholic, but I think he does something like athletes in motion or something.
This is your first time.
Yeah, that. What, like,
I didn't know you actually put it out there actually.
What?
yeah.
Friend Sharon.
Yeah, it's nice.
Don't even understand.
I don't know.
And with most college ministries like that, yeah.
But I mean,
Because like my boyfriend at Indian Hills, he like came to faith through being an FCA. And FCA is one of those things that they're like, oh yeah, I go to FCA.
Cigar.
I feel like I saw that a lot in high school. Everyone went to FCA. But I think it's a little different. It's a little bit more, I feel like, disciplined in college. A little bit more like, oh yeah, if you go to FCA, not everybody goes to FCA.
so beautiful, but it's so it feels like slim one. It's not like you're about you. It's like your parents can make you go to that. Your parents can say, you know what, drop you off.
And that was
You're going.
displaced on
In college, you get to make your own choices. you have a lot more independence.
You don't.
How big is Salt, Iowa City? Like, how many student leaders do you guys have?
Excuse me.
Where's Gabby? Gabby is a Salt resident. You might know.
Is it like 50, 80, 100, 200?
Probably closer to like, probably between 50 and 80, I would say.
Because Ames was like 300.
Yeah. I think there's probably like 4 or 5 that come out.
See, and Ames culture is just. We went to different. It's a different vibe. It's a different, whole different ballgame where it's like. We're like 100 students a night, you know, so it's like a lot of people go to soccer.
Yeah.
I mean, Brock Purdy went to soccer.
Yeah.
It's like he was a student leader. Like,
Yeah. I would be super with him.
I'm gonna watch the Super Bowl, and I was like, that's awesome.
I kind of know him. Yeah, I don't know. It's so interesting. It's like,
I feel like every salt company has different. They have a different culture.
oh
You
yeah.
know, they're all a little unique, which is how it should be.
Yes, exactly. I think that's healthy too because it's like we're all copies of this. And it's like,
And it really
honestly, I was irritated.
It was.
But my brother goes to Kinteo. He came here. He'd been here before, but he came with us a couple weeks
She's
ago.
a big fan. She would do it again. Not a fan. It was super hard. Like,
decent to get it done with.
to get it done.
What the heck is that?
You all have a bias to your own, like, salt company.
I was like, well, it's a Sunday morning.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like,
Let's do this.
Chinese and peace and learnings. I hope they're from the same network. Like,
Same kind of DNA background.
I cannot shut that off. I've tried every possible way.
You're bringing up fire. I'm kidding.
I know, right?
Like a heater.
Seriously. I'm gonna go home and build a fire.
It really helped.
Lizard, you screenshot those to the fire. All right, let's grade these and
That's so funny.
Like, oh, I think we'll go over them.
yeah, we're gonna go over them. We'll go over them real quick. So you just got the percentages there at the top. You can figure out that. For number 2, which members of the Trinity are responsible for creation? All the above, yes, all 3. All 3 members.
Because I did that's. I went back to.
I guess you can just keep them. I forgot to have you switch, so just keep them. Grade your own. I trust you guys. The Bible teaches that God created Adam and Eve in a special personal way. In what way is mankind created differently than the animals? God's image. Exactly. Made in God's image. Do you have an alternate?
I just said, yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Number 5 is true. The entire creation, even inanimate creation, is intended to show God's glory. 5, this is for credit only. Name and describe one ministry of the angels in relationship to believers. The options: revealing, guiding, providing, protecting, delivering, strengthening, and encouraging agents in answering prayer. And the last one is pretty sweet, if you remember this: attendance upon the righteous dead. He talked about the angel delivering the body of Lazarus when he died and that kind of thing, like angels kind of being in attendance, so to speak, when a righteous person dies.
Can you say them again?
Yeah, and they're the last couple of pages of that reading in Dickinson. Revealing, guiding, providing, protecting, delivering, strengthening, and encouraging. They are strengthening and encouraging agents in answering prayer, and then attendance upon the righteous dead.
Me and Aubrey said messenger. I looked over at her, I was like, what'd you say? She said messenger. And I was like,
Well, I'm going to give you credit because that actually is, they do that, which is revealing. Their messenger.
right. I feel like I see like,
They reveal.
like,
Yeah. That's legit.
you know?
It's legit. I agree. According to the Bible Project video on heavenly beings, God created blank to ultimately rule over the heavenly beings. mankind, we will rule over the heavenly beings, which is unimaginable that we get to rule.
Jeff, there's a part of me that I was like, is this a trick question? Is this Jesus? And I was like, God didn't create Jesus. Like, what are you talking? And then I just...
I would have probably had to take double off. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, go ahead and pass those up this way to Eric up here, and then I'll give them to... All right, Jack. I can hand them across the way. All right, and then we'll flip the notes.
Yeah. Yes. They definitely said that, because I remember that.
The S on the first one.
I know, but I just like, after I caught my first mistake, I guess I checked out.
So especially for you newbies in here, the reason that we do quizzes is, as you guys all know, most of us do more what is inspected than expected, you know what I mean? And I just know the reason that I kept going back to school to learn stuff rather than just buying this big old thing and just reading it cover to cover is because I could do that. Would I actually read it? Or would I read it at the same level as if I had a quiz to answer to? No way. There are those handful of people out there that are self-learners. I needed the whip of quizzes and essays and a professor, like especially when it came to languages like Hebrew and Greek. If I didn't have to stand up and recite Hebrew in front of a professor and all my fellow, there's no way I would have ever learned a language because I'm terrible at languages. So I'm just saying in every aspect, the accountability of each other and me, it helps the learning. It's not just to be the cop. It's to encourage learning, right? So that's why we do it. So don't get mad at Alyssa when she throws quizzes at you. Don't get mad at me either. No. All right, let's do this. I'm gonna kind of fly like an angel. I'm gonna fly through some of this because you did some reading on this, but I'm just gonna hit some important points. And then we're gonna spend the last part talking about the sons of God and daughters of men in Genesis chapter 6, this mysterious little thing that happens there. So that's just going to be for fun as we close out tonight. So angels. Why are angels so mysterious? Because this is our story. The Bible is our story. We will only encounter angels as they intersect with us. The Bible is not the story of angels. It's not to tell us the story of angels. That's why they're so mysterious. It's just, he wrote us a book to help us. I love this in The Horse and His Boy. Child, said the lion, I am telling you your story, not hers. No one has told any story but their own. So what happens is this boy Shasta can't figure out why one thing happened to him, another thing happened to Erebus, and all these different, and he's like, Aslan, why? And he's like, oh, that's not your story. I'm only going to talk to you about your story. So I'm just saying, he's like, oh, there's a whole story about angels. Yeah, that's not your story. I'm not going to tell you about that. Someday. You guys read the Narnia books? I don't even have kids anymore at home, and I still reread them. That used to be my excuse, is just to read them with my kids, and now I still go back and reread them. You guys, if you want, you can. I think you can do this on Spotify, but certainly Audible. They put out a really beautiful, audio version of the books, and like Patrick Stewart, that awesome British voice, he does the last one. So they're all incredible actors that are the voices narrating these books. So if you want to just listen to them, I like being read children's books to me. Somebody else, like Patrick Stewart. Okay, Lord Erickson states every reference to angels is incidental to some other topic. Right? If they happen to be part of the story, then they're in there. I'm going to read for you Deuteronomy 29:29, which just says, the hidden things belong to the Lord your God, but the revealed things belong to us and our children forever, so that we may follow all the words of this law. So he's like, oh, there's stuff I haven't put in the Bible, but the stuff I have put in your Bible is so that you'll follow the ways of the Lord. So stick with this, and then just know oh, the mysterious things, and there's a lot of them belong to the Lord, and every now and then he gives us little glimpses, but not everything. So, yet angels are found repeatedly through the story of the Bible, so even though they're kind of incidental, they show up a lot. So malak is, and I want to help you out. So see that the letter second in from the left, you read Hebrew actually right to left, not left to right. But when you're reading left to right, see that it looks like an X kind of? Underneath that, it should look like a tiny little T. It's like a little S or something in there. Yeah, it should be a T. It doesn't really matter to you guys, but it bugged me. That's so funny. So anyway, it's found 196 times in the Old Testament. 196 times. That doesn't include the times that other words like cherubim, like even in Genesis, the first two occurrences that we have is the serpent coming, and at the end of Genesis 3, we have a cherub. So those don't even get counted. This is just the word for angel. So I don't know if you added them all up, how many there'd be. But Genesis 3, you've got the occurrence of the serpent. And you're like, where'd he come from? Once again, well, not your story. We'll find out a little bit more, but we'll talk about him a little bit more. And then in 3:24, where the angel is there to guard the way to the tree of life, right? The cherub, he's called there, but that's also. So we keep finding it right from the opening page of the Bible. We're going to see these angels. In the New Testament, angelos, it's how we get our word angel, is actually just trying to pronounce a Greek word, angelos. It's found 172 times in the New Testament. 172. So I'm just saying, the reason we're taking some time to talk about them is even though there's not a full story about them, they must be fairly important, and the incidental times that they show up give us some patterns to learn who they are. So in the life of Jesus, I've got a handful of ones that I'm just going to read one of those. But in the life of Jesus, Luke 1, angels appearing to Zechariah and to Mary, right? So right away, you open the New Testament, there they are again in the very first opening chapters. Matthew 1, the angel appears to Joseph. Like everybody, it seems like, that's going to have an important role, finds themselves being encountered by an angel on the front end. Joseph, by the way, is also going to be told by an angel to run to Egypt and protect the child. And we're going to talk about what that might have happened there. Matthew 4, angels minister to Jesus after the temptations, right? So as soon as the temptations are over, it says angels came to attend him. I'm going to read for you from Luke 22, starting in verse 39. 22:39, the prayer in the garden where he made his way out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. And when he reached the place, he told them, "Pray that you may not fall into temptation." Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt and began to pray, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will but yours." Then an angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthening him. Okay, but in that same narrative, he specifically said, "Hey, disciples, I need you guys. I'm facing a lot. Can you please stay awake and pray with me?" They fall asleep, so God sends an angel to come down. Like, he needs companionship. He needs somebody to help him. You know what I mean? In his humanness. I just think that's beautiful. Like, the humans aren't doing their job. Here comes an angel. It's kind of I kind of forget you read fast enough that you forget how often angels are just kind of intersect, and then the next verse they're gone. It's one little, just one little blurb. In Luke 24, they announce Jesus' resurrection at the empty tomb. So it's so many crucial moments angels show up. In the life of the church, in Acts 5 and again in Acts 12, apostles are delivered out of prison. In Acts 27, let me read that one for you. Acts 27, starting in verse 21. They're in that ship trying to get to Rome. They had been without food for a long time. Paul stood among them and said, "You men should have followed my advice not to sail from Crete and sustain this damage and loss. But I urge you to take courage, because there will be no loss of any of your life, but only the ship. For last night, an angel of God that I belonged to and served stood by me and said, "Don't be afraid, Paul. It's necessary that you appear before Caesar." So it's at these really critical moments, God will send an angel to pass on a promise. Pretty cool. In Acts 8 and Acts 10, it's angels that tell Philip what he's supposed to do in sharing the gospel. Tell Cornelius in Acts 10, hey, receive this guy. So angels just appear and can be messengers, like you guys were saying. Okay, this is one I want you to look at. If you got your Bible, you do have your Bible. Go to 1 Thessalonians, since you have your Bible. Go to 1 Thessalonians 2. So this is about angels in the life of the church, and this is like on the other side of the angelic spectrum. Because in chapter 2 of 1 Thessalonians 2:17. But as for us, brothers and sisters, after we were forced to leave you for a short time in person out in Tarsus, we greatly desired and made every effort to return and see you face to face. So we wanted to come to you, even I, Paul, time and again, but Satan hindered us. For who is our hope, our joy, or crown of boasting, the presence of our Lord Jesus at his coming? Is it not you? Indeed, you are our glory and joy. I just think that's so intriguing. Paul, it's like Satan just kept his hand up, preventing him from doing that. So I just want us to know, we love those moments where the holy angels are coming and encouraging and releasing prisoner doors and everything. And then there's those times that the apostles are like, Satan is out there trying to stop us, and he got away with it. Why did God not prevent Satan from doing that? We don't know. But he had some awareness that Satan was actually the one thwarting him. And so, even, now I've got the movie on my mind. That's not on you, that's on me. And when we were there, when Mark and I were there, was it 2 times ago? And we went out to the clinic where a bunch of witchcraft and stuff had happened. And Novice Kalunga, one of the guys in that picture, he was like, "Oh, that old devil, we know that devil. I'm not afraid of that devil. We're just going to go to sleep tonight." And he's just like, he's encountered so much demonic stuff. And here's us Americans like, I'm afraid, Anyway, but his courage, and he prayed over us. And so we went to bed. The next morning, Mark was like, "Wow, what was with that baby in the middle of the night?" I'm like, "Totally, what was with that baby crying?" Well, we were the only 2 that heard it. The doors were all locked. There were people, we thought some mother was bringing a child that was sick to the clinic. The doors were locked. The people were out there sleeping in front of the doors. There was no baby the whole time, and all. So I'm just saying, why did Satan do that stuff? Maybe to rattle us, maybe to get us to leave early and not complete the work that we were doing. Whatever, I don't know why. But these weird things can happen, and we have to remember, I'm grateful for the holy angels, and God sends them often to protect and guide. But there is a devil and his minions also, and they're alive and well also. Yeah.
Something that I think about a lot about is in Salt Ames we did a spiritual warfare late night. It was Hannah Beth and Ben Reiner, who's now in India, and they were talking about how Satan is one being and how he's not
omnipresent.
Yeah. So it's actually, if you're oh yeah, Satan, you're are you sure that's actually Satan? Because Satan can't be everywhere at once. He's in one place at one time. So it's 100%. I think it's interesting when talking about Satan, where it's you can't talk about Satan at being everywhere at one time.
Yes.
He
That's
can
right.
be at one place, but he can't be.
It's unlikely that anybody in this room is enough of a threat that Satan himself came.
Yeah, I just think
You know what I
that's
mean?
so
Like,
interesting. And
like
we
he's
don't
got
think
bigger
about
fish,
that.
yeah. But it's kind of like when we talk about if there's a war and we talk about that, like in World War II, MacArthur got to the Philippines. Well, MacArthur himself wasn't on the islands very much, but his troops were. You know what I mean? So sometimes when we talk about Satan, we're just talking about his legion, his troops. You know what I mean? Kind of a thing.
But I just always thought that was interesting.
No, I'm glad you brought that. It's a very good point. He's an isolated being. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Actually, it's an important thing. Yeah.
So would we call them demons or
Yeah.
just unholy angels?
Either, because the Bible calls them both. Also, we shorthand for us is demons, right? But they are angels, right? They're unholy angels. They're some of those that rebelled with Satan. So they're also powerful. Etc. So I brought that one up just because that's also in the narratives of what he does toward the church. So in the next one, some blanks to fill out. This is from the stuff that you read for the most part. Angels are created, right? So number one, Psalm 148, Colossians 1:16. We read one at the beginning before it started, also from the Psalms. So they often appear in human form, but they are a different creature. They're not human. Sometimes, when someone dies, oh, now I've got a guardian angel up in heaven for me, this person. We don't become angels. Humans don't become angels. Angels are a whole different created being than humanity. There's no mixing.
So like with 1 Samuel 28, with Miriam feeling like she's being tricked into like calling Samuel's like soul basically up from the ground, and then he's like, no, I'm not trying to like trick you. Saul is talking about this, but he's like desperate. He's looking for any sort of like advice because he's gotten himself in a rock and a hard place. But then she goes, verse 11, the woman says, well, whose spirit do you want me to call up? Call up Samuel. Saul replied, when the woman saw Samuel, she cried, you deceived me. You are Saul. Don't be afraid, the king told her. What do you see? And I see a God coming up out of the earth. She said, what does he look like? He's an old man wrapped in a robe. She replied, Saul realized it was Samuel, and he fell to the ground before him. And then Samuel talks to Saul, kind of berates him about the position he's in. But that word is like Elohim for Samuel in that moment. And so if we are different than angels after we die, like how is that?
Yeah, Elohim is a really general word. Now, it's used very specifically about the Creator God in Genesis 1, and that's not alone. Throughout the Old Testament, the one true God. It's kind of like the way that we use little g gods versus capital G God, but it's the same word. You know what I mean? It's just how we know in context, we're talking about the one or a minor. So we'll talk about gods that aren't even alive. Like in Thailand, if you see all the little, idolatrous gods, we'll call those gods, Or some really chiseled guy or whatever, you're like, what a god, or whatever. I'm just saying, like, you use that phrase in a lot of ways that we know are different than the one true God. So but it's possible, like in that narrative there, it's a god, meaning it's a really big, scary being, not necessarily that he got confused about the one true God or whatever. You know what I mean? Or she. So, but I'm also saying that there's a difference between departed humans, like Elijah and Moses coming to talk to Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration or whatever. So there are departed humans that are also spectacular if you saw them, but a different thing than the angels who were created to be that way,
Not really a question, but just like, what are your thoughts on like Aquinas? Like writes a lot on like angels, like the Summa. Like it's not scripture, but pretty insightful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that there are like Thomas Aquinas, different ones that they're very biblically informed, and then they go from that. Okay. So, for instance, when we get to Genesis 6, and I talk about what I think about the sons of God and the daughters of men and all that, I say very boldly, hey, this is my, I think, biblically informed idea, but it's a different thing than a thus saith the Lord. I know with precision these other things are stated very clearly. So I get a little nervous about Aquinas and other more ancient writers that kind of want to go off on the angels, and I think extract a little too much and build a tighter theology than I think we even have. You know what I mean? So, again, one of the most brilliant minds to ever hit the planet. So if you were here, I'd be like, hey, you can have Dr. Aquinas. But I would say, yeah, sometimes there was all the way, especially into the Middle Ages, a mysticism that was just prevalent in the world, and so you can see a lot of those writers going into this kind of mystic idea, fascination with the unseen world, So, but I respect Aquinas a ton. So, and he wrote so much, he's bound to like go off every now and then, kind of like me tonight. Yeah, me and Aquinas, almost the same. Secondly, angels, though glorious in our human eyes, are under mankind. Under mankind. So Hebrews 1:14. 1 Corinthians 6:2 and 3 is when he's trying to say, you guys in the church, you should judge these matters. You know what's right and wrong. Tell each other, like judge these things. Don't you know you're going to judge angels? You can certainly judge each other when all of a sudden, some dude is sleeping with his stepmom. Say what's right about that. Like he's just, in fact, he's like, you're going to do this. Now, I don't know what that means, judging angels. I think it just means a place of authority. Like judges just have that authority. In other words, holy angels haven't done anything wrong. We're not going to judge them in the same way. But he's just saying, use your rank. You're above angels even. So, pretty amazing. Number 3, angels are myriad. Many. They're myriad and powerful. In Matthew 26:53, when Jesus says, hey, if I wanted to, I could call 12 legions down. That's upwards to 70,000 angels. You know what I mean? Like, they're at my disposal. I could just, Revelation 5, their number was countless thousands plus thousands and thousands. Like, he's not even trying to count them, but it's just to say, we're not talking about Michael, Gabriel. Like, we can't count them on one hand. Like, we're talking about a spectacular number of those. Genesis 3:24, how powerful they are. Like, that one angel is going to keep anybody out. 2 Kings 6:17 is where Elisha's servant sees the mountain covered with horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. 2 Peter, angels are greater and mighty in power. Okay, number 4, the angel of the Lord. Let's do this. Go back to Genesis 16 with me for this one, because this is like another category of angel. Likely when we see the angel of the Lord, at least often, it is likely Jesus in a pre-incarnate state coming. And the reason I'm saying that is very specifically the angel of the Lord. And here's what it looks like. So in chapter 16, verse 6 of Genesis 16, Abram replied to Sarai, here, your slave is in your hands. Do whatever you want with her. And Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away. Let me just say, when you see stuff like this, God is not vindicating what Abram or Sarai did. He's telling the story of what happened, right? So don't ever look at this and see, wow, God seems to be approving of abusive situation. He's not. It's telling the story of what actually happened. Because God actually intervenes to spare her, right? Okay, so the angel of the Lord, here we are. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She replied, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress, submit to her authority. The angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. Like, this is similar to Genesis 12 language about Abraham, right? The angel of the Lord said to her, you have conceived and you will have a son. You will name him Ishmael, which means God hears. Okay, God hears you. He's listening to you. The Lord has heard your cry for affliction. This man will be like a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone. Everyone's hand will be against him. He'll settle near all his relatives. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roi. God sees. So God hears and now God sees. But she calls him the Lord, right? El Roi. First she said, in this place I've actually seen the one who sees me. So I'm just saying there's these moments where it seems that people understand, oh, this is actually the Lord coming to me. So the only thing we can splice together, and there's many of these occurrences, or several, not many, several, that is likely Jesus. The reason Jesus is because he's the only incarnate one of the Trinity, right? So in the human form, pre-incarnation. Anyway, that's the best we can do because other angels don't receive worship, right? Other angels are like, no, don't do that, don't do that. Only bow for the Lord. The angel of the Lord receives worship. So something spectacular is going on with the angel of the Lord. So where did Satan come from? The only two passages really that give us deeper clues, Isaiah 14, shining morning star, how you have fallen from the heavens. You said to yourself, I'll make myself like God, the Most High. Then you will be brought down to Sheol, into the deepest region of the pits. So even his inclination to be like the Most High, remember then in Genesis 3, what does he offer to Adam and Eve? you could be like the Most High. So this thing that was in him, he's trying to offer to us. And then Ezekiel 28, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty, on the day you were created, a guardian cherub and blameless in your ways, until wickedness was found in you, and that being expelled and banished in disgrace from the mountain of God. So in both these, there seems to be that they're talking about these human kings, but then all of a sudden it goes to this elevated language that seems to be talking about something much greater than this human on the stage, on the human stage. So a lot of theologians look at these and they think, are these just kind of little shadows giving us a little idea of what Satan's fall was actually like? But that's as much as we're going to get. And even those, you're like, well, that's it. That's as close as we're going to get. Is he actually talking about Satan? It seems like it. It would match even what goes on in Revelation, the description of Satan. About as close as we come. So what's the value in studying angels? One, it reminds us that there is an unseen supernatural world all around us. There's an unseen supernatural world. So like Job, for instance. When you read the book of Job, all Job experiences is the storms and the deaths and all that stuff. He doesn't even know that this whole unseen world was going on, where Satan was going and asking permission and all that, right? Until the end of the book, we know more about what actually happened than Job does. All he got to see were the storms and the deaths. And everything. So it reminds us there's this unseen supernatural world, and we get too materialist as Christians even. 2 Kings 6 is where that, open his eyes, and Elisha's servant sees all these angels all around. If we could have our eyes opened, maybe we'd see. Secondly, it causes us to flee to Jesus for our defense. I wish we had time. We don't, to go through Ephesians 6. Our battle is not against flesh and blood, against rulers, powers. So we go to Jesus because it would be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. That's what he says in Ephesians 6. You don't go after demons, you guys. It's some, especially like Pentecostal churches, where, hey, everybody, we're going to start kicking Satan out of here. Everybody start kicking. And, these churches, I'm just saying, any demonic force, would not be threatened by you. The only thing we have is Christ. Christ is, those beings are stronger than, don't think you're going to go up in Jesus' name. That's all we have. We're wrapped in the power of Christ, but don't imagine that our defense is like in our courage or something, because they are not frightened by you. Okay. Go to the book of Jude with me. I want you to. Actually, hold on to that. I'll come back to that. We're going to go to Jude in just a moment. It's about people that think too little about angels. And yeah, remember even in the book of Acts, the 7 sons of Sceva who started, trying to throw demons out of somebody, and they're like, wait a minute. I know Paul and I know Jesus. Who are you? And these demons attack them, and this demon just rips them apart. So anyway, I'm just saying, our defense is Jesus, not ourselves. Why was there so much demon activity during Jesus' earthly life? In other words, you got to understand this. Throughout the whole Old Testament, we don't see in any stretch the kind of demon activity that we do during Jesus' time. After Jesus' ascension, we see a little bit in the book of Acts, and then it just dissipates. One of the pictures that one theologian gave that I think is really good is, have you ever seen, like especially in the autumn in Iowa, if you see somebody going through some really dry grass on the horizon, and as they walk, you see grasshoppers like all around them, and so they step, and then the minute they step away, they all just kind of go back in. Here's what I think is a good way of understanding. When Jesus Christ stepped onto this planet, the demon world went bonkers, right? Like, they were pretty embedded. They pretty much had their rule and reign. And now Jesus, Son of God, stepped on this earth. And so you just see this flurry of activity. Like, if you could just, put a chart of demon activity from creation to Revelation, you'd be like, oh yeah, there's something, and then it kind of goes back, to just run-of-the-mill, I guess, demon activity. So note that even Satan seemingly lost Jesus when the angel told Joseph, go to Egypt. It's almost like there was a mystical cloak put over. So angels come and announce Jesus' birth, And then when there's that big murder thing going on to try to kill Jesus and all the other infants, Joseph, take Jesus down to Egypt. And I think there's like a spiritual cloak that goes over, because he grows up, they go back, right? They go back to the promised land. He raises it all the way till he's 30. And there's seemingly, we have no record of any kind of turbulence until, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. And it's almost like Satan, wherever he was around the world, was like, whoosh, because in all the Gospels, the very next thing is encountering Satan in the wilderness, right? So somehow Satan, because he's not omnipresent, seemingly lost Jesus, didn't know who he was. Neither did anybody else, right? He seems to have been kind of cloaked until it was time. So on the human level and on the supernatural level, boom, all of a sudden the angel, the demonic angels fly to the scene. So, yeah. So even at the temptation in Luke 4, at the end, it says, and then the devil left him until an opportune time. So even Satan didn't stick around Jesus the whole time. He'd go do some other stuff, come back again, so. I think that's why there was a lot of demon activity, though, around the time of Jesus, is they were stirred. The demonic activity in our time, I do believe you can write down two different texts, 2 Corinthians 11 and Galatians 1, 6 to 10. Galatians 6, 1 to 10. I'll read a couple of verses from 2 Corinthians 11, verses 12 to 15. But I will continue to do what I am doing in order to deny any opportunity those who disregard as our equals in what they boast. Verse 13, such people, I'm in 2 Corinthians 11, 13. For such people are false prophets, deceitful workers, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it's no surprise that his angels also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. Their end will be according to their works. I'm telling you guys, like I took my mom to her church, United Church of Christ, that I was raised in, for Mother's Day, and hearing this pastor and what was going on, I was just like, is anybody else a little weirded out right now like this? You're a pastor. We're at a church. There's a cross in the front of this, and yet the ridiculous things that go on in the name of Jesus. You know what I mean? So a lot of people with their, square little cleric or whatever are disguised as. So I'm saying demon activity is still alive and well, but a lot of times, I think through false teaching and figuring out how to make these false churches and ways to disguise, like wolves, among the sheep. So you got to be aware. It's not that the demons they're not active anymore. They're just more embedded. Right? That's their whole thing, is to lie, to deceive. So don't imagine that places like India and Thailand have more demons than we do just because it's more overt. They're very well and good here.
I think something that I heard once is that so many times when angels appear, people are afraid. But demons, they're deceitful, and they almost trust, they look less scary almost, right. Because when the angel appears to people, people, that's they're afraid.
Good call. Good call. Well, and honestly, the demon world is served by the Western world imagining that there is no such thing as spiritual activity, right? Because if all of a sudden I get too afraid of a demon, I might run to Jesus for help, right? So it serves their purposes to stay on the down low and let us all think that they don't exist, right? That serves them. Like anybody that's trying to bilk people of money or whatever, there's there's constantly the banking world or whatever. What they try to do is slither into the banking system and get, take the money and get out before anybody can find them, So same with the demon world. If nobody ever realizes that they actually exist, they can get away with all sorts of stuff.
How about other religions? Would you say Allah is a demon?
It's hard to know, when you read things like Mormonism, the founding of Mormonism, you're like, dude, there's a lot of demon stuff in there. So I don't know about religions in general. I mean, some more overtly, like the Buddhism of Thailand especially, when there's just actually false gods being built around. With Islam, I mean, certainly a dark religion that oppresses and kills and, has a lot of demonic stuff. As far as the founding of it, is it one guy that was trying to build up himself? Was he, kind of led along by demon activity? I mean, it does seem like some level of demon activity has to be involved there when so much of it is to diminish the role of Jesus and take power onto themselves. You know what I mean? So it seems to fit the bill. Yeah. But then again, like Mormonism and stuff, you're like, wow, you don't have to be a theologian to see that, Okay, Genesis 6. I'm going to try to do this real fast because this is just theology candy in my world. This is again my biblically informed speculation. Okay, so this is not. I might be wrong, but I think I'm right. Otherwise, I wouldn't be teaching it. Okay, so Genesis 6. When mankind began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took any they chose as wives for themselves. And the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with mankind forever because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. Meaning, by the way, not their lifetime, but there will be 120 years before the flood comes. The Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterward when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind who bore children to them. They were the powerful men of old, the famous men. When the Lord saw that the human wickedness was widespread in the earth and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time, that is a really loaded sentence, right? The Lord God regretted that he made man on the earth and was deeply grieved. Then the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I created off the face of the earth, together with the animals, creatures that crawl, and the birds in the sky, for I regret that I made them. Noah, however, found favor with the Lord. Okay, so this is the view of these, Westminster guys. I'm just trying to back up that this isn't just some wild hair idea of mine, right? Guys like Wenham, Kidner, and those guys are Hebrew scholars. Here's my position. Sons of God, I believe, are angels. In Job 1, even in the book of Enoch, a lot of other Old Testament passages, when you see sons of God, it is almost always angels. That's just another category reference. Philo, Josephus is there. There's no textual indication that this term refers to the offspring of the godly Seth. In other words, people that reject what I'm about to teach would say, no, these were all humans. The sons of God were Seth's godly heritage, right? Because Seth was the one that at that time people began to call in the name of the Lord when Seth was born. So it's more the evil people versus the good, righteous people. And I'm saying no, I think it was a supernatural sons of God, angels, and daughters of mankind. Daughters of mankind, these are the daughters born to all of mankind. And the Nephilim, that are mentioned there in verse 4, seemingly are the progeny of the two, right? The Nephilim are on the earth when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind. So these creatures, these powerful creatures that are so terrifying that they live in legend all the way until you get to the book of Joshua, and they're like, we saw the Nephilim, meaning these huge, powerful creatures, we can't go in there and conquer them. So something about these heroic, more powerful than mankind beasts, seem to have been roaming around pre-flood, and even the legend of them kept going all the way into Joshua's day.
It's just legend?
I don't know. It's at least legend, right? Like you wonder, Goliath, whatever, or is it? I don't know. Okay, so New Testament echoes. Now, here's what we're going to do, and I'm going to fire hose this. Okay, but let's go back to 2 Peter, but I do want your Bibles open for this, because I want you to see this isn't just me making stuff up. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. For if God didn't spare the angels who sinned, but cast them into hell. Okay, now this is the word Tartarus, by the way. It's the only time in the whole Bible that this word is used for hell. Usually there's a couple other Greek words that we see the word hell. But this one's a unique one, Tartarus. You probably have it in the bottom of your Bible or something. So these angels didn't spare the angels who sinned, cast them into this place called Tartarus, and delivered them in chains of utter darkness, kept for judgment. And he didn't spare the ancient world, but protected Noah. Okay, so look at him linking this group of beings with the time of Noah. a preacher of righteousness and 7 others when he brought the flood and the world of the ungodly. And if he reduced the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes and condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is coming to the ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot, distressed by the depraved behavior of the immoral. For as that righteous man lived among them day by day, his righteous soul was tormented by the lawless deeds they saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and keep the righteous under punishment for the day of judgment, especially those who follow the polluting, now this is important, the polluting desires of the flesh, and they despise authority. Okay, so remember that. There are these beings who are kept in some kind of prison, waiting for their day of judgment, and why they followed the polluting desires of their flesh and despised authority. And it was all seeming in that Genesis, especially Noah referenced there. Okay, now go to the book of Jude, right before Revelation, and look at verse 5. That's why I said, wait, we'll pick this up in a minute. Earlier. Jude, verse 5. Now I wanted to remind you, although you came to know all these things once and for all, that Jesus saved a people out of Egypt and later destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels who did not keep their own position, but abandoned their proper dwelling, like where they're, you've got boundaries, you got to stay in these boundaries. They didn't stay in the boundaries that they were given. These he has kept in eternal chains, there it is again, in deep darkness for the judgment on the great day. Likewise, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns committed sexual immorality, perversions, and serve as examples by undergoing the punishment of eternal life. So now he's linking again Sodom and Gomorrah and sexual sin, just like we saw in 2 Peter, this combo of things, just like, right? So these seem to represent, back in your notes now, these seem to represent a specific subgroup of angels who have been thrown into Tartarus in chains of darkness, kept for a future judgment. And that fear is, here's what I'm going to say, the fear of being put in there is, okay, do you remember in Luke 8, maybe you can jot down Luke 8 and just look at it later. Do this quick. In Luke 8, do you remember when he stepped on the shore of the Gerasenes, the Gerasene demoniac came up? We know who you are. You're Jesus the Christ, right? And you know what they say? Don't throw us into that pit. There's something about, they know that a group of them have been sentenced to a place, and they are terrified that this Jesus has the potential to take them and throw them into the same place. What I'm saying is the place that's being described here. And it's so fearful, the other demons that are alive and well, roaming around the earth, right, that they also will get thrown in chains waiting for that day of judgment prematurely. And they don't want, no, don't send us there, right? So these angels are put into the context, again, of Noah and the flood, also bold sexual immorality. So the next thing I have there is, in the context of Noah and the flood. Maybe you already wrote that in there. I've got some little blanks there for you. Anyway, these angels did not keep their position, but deserted their proper dwelling. Jude 6, they despised authority. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, these angels went after strange or other flesh. I think this may point to a subset of demons who are bound while allowing the rest to roam free. Okay, a couple other passages, and we'll wrap it up. 1 Peter 3. Let's go back to 1 Peter 3. Oh man, remember when I said I was going to lay you out early? Sorry. I'm on the home stretch though. I'll be quick. Verse 18, 1 Peter 3. For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring you to God. He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit. Now check this out. This is a really weird passage. In which he also went and made proclamation to the spirits in prison, who in the past were disobedient, when God patiently waited in the days of Noah. Well, wow, what? Connecting it again, back to the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared. In it, a few, that is 8 people, were saved through water, right? Baptism now, corresponding to that, baptism now saves you, etc. Okay, but here's what he says. Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God with angels, authorities, and powers subjected to him. Here's what I'm saying. I believe what happened when it says that he, back in verse 18, put to death in the flesh, made alive with his spirit, and went and made proclamation. That word proclamation is not evangelism. It's not the word give the gospel. It's proclamation, as in I'm telling you an edict. What I think is saying, I think Patrick Schreiner, that we met down at Midwestern, has the same view. In those 3 days before the resurrection, he went down and proclaimed, I've won. Proclaimed, I'm crushing you, right? This was a proclamation of his victory. And I think the audience of that were these demons, right? The demons done it. So he went and made proclamation to these spirits in prison. Now, where do they show up again? If you go to the book of Revelation, I think we see where they actually are being held and get a chance to do some bad stuff. Chapter 9, fifth angel blew the trumpet. The key for the shaft, given this key, a key for the shaft to the abyss was given to him. By the way, that word abyss is the word that is used by the demoniac in Luke. That same word. Don't send us to the abyss. Here, take the shaft to the abyss was given to him. He opened the shaft to the abyss, and smoke came out, shaft like smoke from a great furnace. Sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the shaft. Locusts came out of the smoke on the earth. The power was given to them like the power that scorpions have on the earth. They were told not to harm the grass or the earth, like what grasshoppers would do. Would do. No, and a green plant, no trees, only people. You do not have God's seal on their forehead. They were not allowed to kill, just to torment. Here, I think these demons are so filled with rage. They've been held and chained, and all their buddies are up there, running around the world. And at that moment, one of the most horrible plagues is God's like, you know what? Turn them loose. And so you can imagine the rage that they would have against humanity, right? So I think that Tartarus, the abyss, they fly. But then in chapter 20, as we know, the angel comes down from heaven holding the key to the abyss, the great chain in his hand. He seized the dragon, the ancient serpent, who's the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, threw him into that abyss, closed it, put a seal on it. So that same kind of jail cell, right, is used again. We'll talk about this in term 2. I do believe there's a millennial kingdom involved here. Anyway, that all this demonic world is thrown into this pit and locked again so that the world can be without Satan and demons for a while. We don't go too far down that. We'll talk about it again, about this millennium thing. But I'm just saying, this abyss seems to be a place, right, where you can chain up some angels and demons and then release them again. They get released, even in Revelation 20. Okay, so here's my bottom line. Why would the demonic world concoct such a plan? What is going on here? Like what? Because, first of all, just rebellion and lust. Remember? They are rebellious against, God said, okay, this is the territory you got. And they broke that. They were rebellious, and they lusted. They lusted after these beautiful women. That's what Genesis 6 says. And even more destructive than that, the second point there is to make redemption impossible. To make redemption impossible. Because if they could pollute the line of Eve, then a Messiah would never be able to come. Because Genesis 3:15, it has to be a son or daughter of Eve, unpolluted from the angelic world, right? This has to be a man, right, that would come to crush the head of the Satan world. And so by coming in and having children, they could pollute the whole race and thus preventing, which is why I think Jesus went down in 1 Peter 3 and said, didn't work. I came, you're crushed, the heel's coming down, you're all gonna die. You know what I mean? Like he gave the victory cry. Now, the problem with this view, Matthew 22:30, Jesus says, there's no marriage in heaven, just like the angels don't marry. And I'm saying, I don't think that's anything to do with marriage or anything else. So that's true. Demons don't cohabitate, it seems. So why would they do that? But Secondly, though, I've got angels are spirit beings, not physical. They say that, but I'm saying angels also perform other material things. They have human functions. They create wind. They do. So all I'm saying is there does seem to be some possibility. So why doesn't that happen anymore? Because the demons are afraid of going to that pit, right? They're terrified that if they cross that line, like their brothers did earlier on, they'll get sentenced to that, and they're terrified out of their minds that God would send them there. So I do think that the reason that that never happens now or happened since then is because that. I think that explains, and which is why to get rid of all that polluted, humanity, the flood came, and we're going to start over. So, all right, there it is. That's the candy aisle for. That's what people that have too much time on their hands think about when it comes to theology. But I think it's also fascinating, you guys, that there's all these other storylines that are going on that are like, wow, what are we going to find out someday? It's actually going on. Guys, thanks for your attention and for letting me keep you a little bit late. Sorry it's so cold in here. I'll be with my family doing some vacationing, so Brian will be here next week. He's great. You're going to love him. If you've never been taught by Brian Derby, you're in for a treat.
Do we need to move the tables for what study?
We could, if anybody has just a little time, we could like just collect all these table tens. Actually, do you want to keep those out?